All right, it's time. Hello, everyone. This is David Dubois, Associate Professor of Marketing from INSEAD. Welcome to this webinar coming live from Paris, where we have a lovely spring day here. Today, we're very excited to cover a super interesting topic, which is central to many questions that you must have in the audience, which are all related to how do we become customer-centric? What does customer centricity even means? How do we build this skill? What are the strategic implications of that? The organizational implications, the structures that can allow organizations to create these muscles, become more customer-centric, and ultimately become more effective. So we talk about customer centricity in the context of Air Liquide and Airgas. Why Air Liquide and Airgas? Well, because I had the pleasure to work together on a case with Jean-Michel Moslonka, who's also going to join us today, on how they transformed, how these companies work together, what customer centricity means in this context. And as this case recently got an award, we thought it would be a very good opportunity to rejoin with our partners from Air Liquide and Airgas and invite you to this conversation. So we are here. We're very excited to be with three esteemed guests, and you can now make yourself visible. First of all, Philippe Martinez, who is one of the case protagonists and the Chief Transformation Officer at Air Liquide. Jay Worley, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Airgas, and Jean-Michel Moslonka, who is Chief Executive Officer at Agalio and the co-writer on the case. So maybe before we get into it, I want to introduce a little bit the gas industry, but maybe can you say a few words just to introduce yourself? Maybe let's start with you, Philippe.
Yes, thank you, David. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So my name is Philippe Martinez. I've been with Air Liquide for 30 years. I was fortunate enough to move from one country to the other all across my 30 years with the company. So I spent quite some time in Asia, in Africa, and in South America. And my current role is to lead the transformation of the company, hopefully toward customer centricity, but probably something we will discuss during the webinar. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for being with us, Philippe. Great. Jay.
Yes, thank you, David. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. I also have 30 years with our company, all with Airgas, which is a U.S. operation. So I've moved around the U.S. In various roles with Airgas. About half of my time has been in our operating units. Half of my time has been in our corporate headquarters. I am a finance and entrepreneurship background, and very much framed and shaped by the industry that I've grown up in. Pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you so much for being with us, Jay. And finally, last but not least, Jean-Michel.
Yes, hello. Hi, David. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. So Jean-Michel Moslonka, I have two activities. Firstly, I'm a CEO at Agalio. So we are a consultancy based in Paris, and we support organizations mainly in pharmaceuticals and industrial B2B industry sectors towards to accompany them in their transformation towards customer centricity, which involves more and more digital transformation component. I know it's a topic that is very dear to the heart of David. So also digital, and we've been working and partnering with Air Liquide for a long time. That's how we came, with the idea of writing this case with David. On top of that, I'm a partner at INSEAD, where I support executive education projects. I do research and case writing, including this case. Very happy to have co-written this case with David. And we have new cases that will come later. We'll not talk about that today, but that will be also quite exciting. Very nice
More
to
to
be
come.
here.
More to come.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jean-Michel. Thank you so much. Well, thank you to all of you for being here. I think it's a great panel. Let me, before we get the conversation going, let me do two things. One is talking about etiquette, the webinar etiquette, and how you guys can interact in case you have questions. So as you probably have noticed, because we have a relatively larger audience today, we're unmuted, but we do not want to discourage you from interacting and asking questions. And so please use the Q&A tab to answer questions at any stage. And we will dedicate at least 15 minutes at the end of, I have a couple of questions, but the idea is really to get the conversation from you as well, to enrich the conversation from your questions. So feel free to use this Q&A tab, and Jean-Michel and I will do our best to be your voice, especially toward the end of the webinar. All right. So just to kick off, let me share a few facts about the industry, about Air Liquide and Airgas, as so many of you may not be familiar with the industry. So maybe next slide. Here, what are we talking about? So we're talking about very fundamental product that many customers need, different types of industrial gas, from oxygen to nitrogen to argon, hydrogen, and so on. Air Liquide is, these are the 2022 numbers, now about 67,000 employees, present in 73 countries. The geographical expansion, Philippe and Jay will probably talk more about this, but was much improved after the merger, given Airgas had more of a US base and Air Liquide was present in other geographies. Revenues of 29.9 billion euros, net profits of 2.7, and a lot of investment, which we'll talk about as well, about 4 billion. A lot of investment really in thinking about that are essential to building customer centricity. What type of technology do you want? What type of solutions are you choosing in order to boost customer centricity, in order to create satisfaction from the customer? You probably have noticed that there's one number which I haven't mentioned yet, which is the number of customers, 3.9 million customers and patients. And this is why perhaps this case is super interesting, because it relates probably to many of your industries where the customer segmentation is extremely varied and diverse. And so maybe if we can go to next slide, just to give a sense, give you a sense of the diversity of the audience here, of the customers here. We range from large customers. Think about them as industrial, very large industrial players in the petrochemical industry, for instance, that rely on very high gas supply, to industrial industrial merchants, to healthcare, to many different other industries, which all have their specificities, including engineering, constructions, a lot of technological players as well. And so you see, it's a very rich customer base. And the questions we are going to ask ourselves, and that is on the mind of Philippe and Jay every day, is how can we become more customer centric in a space which is that varied? What customer centricity means, even in a space where you range from very large, multi-billion players to individual patients in hospitals or in other areas of healthcare. All right. So moving a little bit into Airgas. Next slide, please. So Airgas, which was acquired by Air Liquide, was based in mostly historic base in the US. You see that there is a very healthy diversity as well in customers, and 67% of customers are coming from manufacturing, metal construction, metal fabrication constructions. 15% come from food, beverage, retail, and about 20 more about the life science and healthcare. You see that this very rich model that Jay will talk about as well, that heavily relies on Salesforce and very skilled associates in order to create and maintain strong relationships with customers. But perhaps one thing I want to highlight here is obviously the diversity in customers that we talked about calls for obviously a diversity, or is naturally echoing a diversity of products and the way in which the gas is delivered, from continuous supply from very large customers to a bulk or even gas cylinder, as if you can move to next slide here. So the way that the product would be very different for relatively smaller customers, packaged gas, to micro bulk and bulk for medium-sized customers, to here you see on the right these kind of on-site gas generations for very, very large volume of customers. Obviously, very technical solutions for these three types of customers and three types of needs. And we will talk about this as well, what this means for customer centricity, what type of technological investments do you need in order to foster this customer centricity. So last two slides, before we kick off the conversation. First is, again, why did we organize this webinar? Because of the case, we had the pleasure to work with Philippe and Jay on this case. Got 2 awards. I understand that you will have a chance to have a copy of the case. Obviously, Jean-Michel and I remain available on LinkedIn if there is any question about the case. If you want to learn more, maybe last slide before we kick off the conversation, 2 other resources that could be useful. An article which we wrote in INSEAD Knowledge. So you've got the QR code for this article on the left side, and then on the right side a video on kind of transformation around the customer. So what does that mean in terms of analytics, in terms of test and learn, in terms of organization, some of the topics that we're going to engage in now. So I will stop here because today, we have the real experts in-house, Philippe and Jay. And so perhaps let me ask, start kick off with, very simple questions to you. One of the reasons why this case resonated, so much with, different business schools. We have now more than 70 business schools using it, is because I think it touches on something very fundamental to any business, which is customer centricity. So maybe you can start with asking a question on, can I ask you to describe what customer centricity means for you, and what does it entail from a strategic organizational perspective? And what do you think that Air Liquide and Airgas are so good, have developed like specific skills in that domain? Maybe let's start with Philippe, and then we'll go to Jay.
Yeah, thank you very much, David, and congratulations on the award again.
Thank you.
So I think we started the journey in Air Liquide 122 years ago. So quite some time, and we are not a startup anymore. So something we recognize fully. But what we recognize is that we have had to adapt ourselves to the evolution of the customer needs. And so I think it's very important to be humble enough to recognize that the way we were used to work with customers 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, or maybe 5 years ago is not relevant enough. So I think that the way we look at it is probably let's make sure we adapt to our customers' need. Let's make sure we adapt to market transformation. And so I think that we need to be extremely focused on making sure we understand the environment and we understand the customers. So I think the way we define customer centricity is to make sure that customer is the focal point of all decisions, and that we always try to improve the customer satisfaction, the customer loyalty, and customer advocacy. But we fully understand that this is a ever-moving game we have to play. So it's impossible to be happy with what you are doing. Because if you are happy, then you start being complacent. If you're complacent, you don't transform, you don't evolve. And I think at the end of the day, you are not going to last that much. So yes, so customer centricity is central to what we do and to our strategy, but is I would say is a everlasting journey,
yeah.
And we know we are not perfect. It's clear.
So very. I love this idea of the saying customer centricity is a journey, and not thinking about a goal that you can achieve, but really trying to rethink. How can we get to learn more about customers, to improve, optimize the relationships that we have with them. Jay. So maybe you have slightly different types of customers from where you speak. Anything that you'd like to add? Customer centricity. What do we talk about? Customer centricity or customer centricities, given the diversity of your segments?
Yeah, it's a great question, David. I think when we, as we visualize our company and position customers at the central focus of everything we do, we want to ensure that our associates in their daily work have the ability, and their primary thought is how to meet customer needs. It starts very much from a competitive market position. If we don't do this, our competitors will. The ability for one of our associates to keep customers at the forefront of their daily journeys does depend on our company culture, and it depends on us enabling our teams with the right tools, as well as removing the obstacles as best we can. And I think Philippe did a good job articulating it's an ongoing process. It's heavily dependent on listening and responding to customer needs. And as you pointed out, David, for us, the diversity of our customer portfolio requires us to meet needs and listen in different ways, whether it's customers with smaller volume needs and a wide variety of applications, all the way through to medium-sized customers, and then large customers with very specific, high volume, more narrow applications. The ability to listen and to adapt is critical. We view it as a cultural element at the core of our core values. For us, safety is the most important thing we do every day. We are in a business that handles and distributes hazardous materials. And we want customer centricity to be right up there as a daily priority, because the way that our customers succeed is dependent on the way that we serve them. I think both of those values apply to virtually every business. It's the most sustainable way to run a business for all stakeholders' success.
Thank you so much. This is very insightful. We'll talk a little bit more, and be very curious actually to hear your thoughts about, how do we best listen to customers, and what are the tools, and perhaps some case studies. But it's triggered by one word which you mentioned, which is culture, right? And so before we get into how to listen to customers and how to have the best feedback, perhaps one of the reasons why we wrote the case in the first place was the merger between Air Liquide and Airgas a few years back. And so I was just wondering, at this occasion, you had the opportunity to learn about different types of customers, because as I mentioned in the slides, the segments were quite different. Was there, maybe let me turn to you, to keep on with you, Jay. Was there a particular learnings from the merger when it comes to customer centricity? Was there like a different culture? How did that permeated inside the organization? Were there cross learnings happening between the organizations? What did it entail, perhaps operationally, in terms of tool adaptations?
Yeah, absolutely. Very much so a core part of the integration. which involved the U.S. business of Air Liquide's industrial merchant line and Airgas, and the cultures of both companies had some differences in that Air Liquide's core of that business had been focused historically more on the larger customers, bulk and micro bulk, whereas Airgas historically a more distributor mindset, smaller customers, and just by that very nature, it came with different ways of thinking and a little bit different culture. But everybody shared the same values that I mentioned earlier about safety and how can we build this business to best meet customer needs. And I could give an example as we were integrating the operations onto a common ERP platform and then evaluating what supplemental software tools will we employ. Airgas historically did not make use of Salesforce.com and a related platform called Medallia that Air Liquide at the time had been using to formally listen to customers and then synthesize customer response into usable data. That over the years was something that we were able to integrate into the Airgas operations. And so our sales force is today entirely implemented and adopted Salesforce.com along with the Medallia platform. And one of the ways that we use that is when we have customer survey feedback, each salesperson that's assigned to an account that provides feedback is not only able to use that feedback, but also has a responsibility to close the loop with the customer in response. How do we talk about the feedback that we got? How can we best shape your customer experience going forward? And it's been a very useful tool for us. I think we've got better connection with some customers that historically we might have relied more on anecdotal or historic knowledge as opposed to current day knowledge.
Yeah, so great. No, thank you. Love that answer of saying, like as a marketing researcher, I always love when you meet both worlds, right? Which is qualitative research, insights from the field, but also some quantitative research, right? About metrics and net promoter scores and other things that Medallia offers, and so it can give you a bigger, fuller picture. Now, I guess going back to you, Philippe, like you mentioned, Air Liquide is a very old company, and it's true that your customer centricity is an ever-changing topic. But it's the tenure of the history of Air Liquide points to the fact that one of the reasons why customer centricity is a priority is because you want to maintain strong customer relationships. And so, because customer relationship will be at the heart of, like business success. So maybe a question to you is, how do you even think about building customer relationships? I know you have, different parts of the business. There's like healthcare, there's, industrial merchants. Are there any cross learnings about, what type of relationships are most important? How do you think about relationship building at Air Liquide? Are there specific journeys? How are these relationships transforming over time? And perhaps, how in your current role of Chief Transformation Officer, what does it mean to in terms of skills and talents to accompany this process and this moving target?
Yeah, thank you for the question. A very interesting one. I think Jay mentioned something which is at the core of everything, which is the culture. Probably something we tend to underestimate. I don't know if it's because we are engineers and we like things we can calculate and look at and test. But definitely for us, the cultural part is really at the core of everything we want to do. And I think it's very important to understand from where we are and what is the culture of the company. And it was very clear, I think, before the decision was made to acquire Airgas, that our DNA was very much of a engineering centric company with a very good, I think, customer experience for business to large customers. And I think that at that time we were recognized for the strong DNA, the innovation capabilities, the R&D centers, the number of patents, and being able to sign multi-millions deals in contracts over 15, 20 years period of time. So it was really a very strong, I think, customer relation, but in a very specific customer experience, which is typically the experience of all heavy chemical industries. Major investment, large customers, a 15 years contract, and key account management. So I think we recognized at that time that this was something which was really influencing our culture. And we also, at that time, discover, I would say, that probably there was a new market segment, which was a major opportunity for Air Liquide, which was more of the small accounts. So let's say probably people where you might invoice something between $100 a month to $1,000 a month, to be compared to 10 million euro a month with our larger customers. But I think we were, and it was a good decision. I think we recognized at that time that it would have been extremely difficult for us to move from one culture to the other based on our own capabilities. And so I do think that by recognizing that in order to enter into this new market segment, we were to acquire a brand new set of skills, and that the best way to acquire these skills was probably to join forces with someone who was extremely different from us, maybe the opposite from a market segmentation standpoint, and that it was a clever move to join forces. And I think a large part of the enterprise value we paid for when we acquired Airgas was really for us to acknowledge the fact that this was a game changer for our culture, and was probably a way to buy a lot of time, efforts, and probably mistakes we would have made if we have been to engage into the journey alone without being supported by Airgas.
So great. No, thanks so much, Philippe. Great points here to really highlight and help us understand the complementarity between both. Let me follow up on this question, very important question of culture, where you talked about how the two organizations are complementary. I know maybe you can slightly introduce this to the audience. Matter of cultures means that you need to change practices, and particularly when it comes to, if you look at the last 10 years, customer relationships increasingly relies on your good use of technology to strengthen relationships. What are the tools and so on? So I know you have had some initiatives on the Air Liquide side, the digital factory, open innovation, and so on. But aside from that, I think anything that you can share about new practices or new ways where you've seen, actually, since you have a very long experience of the culture changing, maybe a more open mind to experimentation, maybe a different way of doing things, which then translated into successful use cases and therefore better KPIs and business success.
So maybe I'll start, and Jay, you complement, or we do a reverse, up to you. But just maybe to give you one example, David, is first time I visited Airgas. Honestly, it was a shock for me. It was a bit like going back to the university, trying to learn about the proper management of your day-to-day operations. And why is not that we were not capable of managing operations, is that we were managing operations on a monthly basis. So the rhythm of the company, the decision we were making were based on monthly performance. And when I visited Airgas for the very first time, I discovered the benefits of daily performance management. And I remember very well sitting in one of the call centers with one of the lady who is selling over the phone to customers. And she told me at the end of the day, I'm very happy because today I've been able to reach my daily objective from a gross margin standpoint.
Mhm.
And so I was shocked to discover that based on the proper process, proper ERP, proper organization, you were able to manage the performance of a company on a daily basis and not on a monthly basis like maybe we are more used to do in heavy industries. And this is absolutely a major difference, and really something we have learned from our colleagues from Airgas is the obsession of daily performance management. And this has transformed our operations globally.
Very nice. Very nice. Jay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's very relevant. And as it relates to culture, culture being how do you want the organization to think and breathe and what's in our DNA? And it does hinge on the right tools, but also the right attitudes, which generally come from leaders. And if these are the things that leaders are talking about on a day-to-day basis, those tend to be the things that get the focus in the operations. That's assuming an organization that's got good alignment. And so we do work hard on alignment. But as far as digital tools, and then also some practical tools that have been in play more recently, I know it sounds a little bit elementary, but even just making sure that we have our eyes on getting our fundamentals right daily. Do we ship the right product at the right time? And do we bill it correctly the first time and avoid disputes? That in and of itself makes for an effortless experience for our customers. They don't have to invest a lot of time and energy doing business with us, which frees them up to be better at what they do. And in order to ensure that we've got the right focus there, we've put in place just a routine and regular monitoring of those very elements of our performance to ensure that we're continually improving in those areas. Another example that I would give, which probably also sounds fairly fundamental, but to the extent that we're able to, that we can enable our customers to have an easier experience by using digital capabilities. Think about maybe our website. Our ability to help them advance their performance is meaningful. And with 1 million customers, not every one of them knows the website's capabilities, and we have to help inform them, and in some cases help adopt. And it's been an interesting dynamic in that some customers have been pulling us along on that journey, very much digitally focused, wanting those efficiencies, asking how can we participate with them. And then some customers have been more of a maybe a push where our teams are able to help educate them on the efficiencies they can gain by utilizing those capabilities. And it goes back to listening to your customer and then adapting your solutions for their needs. But across all those spectrums, we've seen good gains. I think in the business case, you noted that at that time, about 10% of in-scope transactions were taking place in some sort of an e-commerce fashion, and we've seen evolution there of over 50%, so that now it's 15+%, which doesn't necessarily sound like a lot on its surface, but we think it also is taking place in lockstep with customer evolution, and we have a lot of upside to continue to grow that number.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Thank you so much. Maybe a follow-up question, actually. Since you touched on e-commerce, and there's a very specificity of Air Liquide with a little bit smaller customers. One of the ways in which you keep building a relationship with customers is having the right tool, as you just mentioned, right? And some customers are prepared, some customers are less prepared. So the question of digital maturity is very important to understand how to get customer centricity right. Now, given with the case, but even your prior experience, what has been do you have any processes to try to address this question of which technology do you want to invest in or consider to strengthen the relationship? Which technology may work, which technology may less work? You have like small tests that are implemented with perhaps the customers that you mentioned who tend to be a little bit more ahead on some digital practices. Are there, on the contrary, examples where it didn't work? And so the question here is really, how do you make sure that you don't leapfrog technology? You want to do too much, maybe, and you kind of diverge from what they actually expect.
Yeah, so great question, and that also it needs to be an ongoing process. We have regular investment analyses on e-commerce and related digital capabilities that we compare what are we hearing from customers with what capabilities do we have and that are available on the market that we don't have. An interesting part of our business is that actual transactional commerce is or started in the area of welding, hard goods, and safety products, which are more of a traditional distributor role that we play in carrying those products, as opposed to the gaseous products, which are really the core of our business, and historically in the US and even around the world weren't so much an online transaction, while websites and capabilities developed around helping inform customers about the gases that they need and the applications. So for us, an interesting part of the journey, and I think a compelling part for the future journey, is how do buying decisions and transactions evolve digitally in the gaseous space. And we're very excited about this. We've mapped a number of customer needs and potential opportunities with what we think are e-commerce capabilities for us in the future. And they run the gamut from the initial customer research and then decision-making, all the way through to transactional excellence, as well as advocacy. And in our view, it's generally, sometimes those capability lifts take place in large tranches from substantial initiatives and focused investment. Sometimes they take place in more of a sprint, and we've got a great portfolio of customers and applications that allow us to pilot things. So piloting and then the capabilities lift associated with that at the time you get to digital scale up that's a routine part of what we do. We also, have in view kind of some of those step change capabilities for the coming years.
Very nice. Thank you, Jay. Philippe, anything to add on this, use case? I mean, from where you sit, I think you probably also have now a bigger say in terms of what talents do I need to do, what new practices in terms of test and learn. How do I build like a log of what has worked and what has not worked? Like anything you can tell us about kind of the architecture and the organizational steps that have been put in place, to encourage the sharing of the good, the bad, maybe the ugly, so that you make sure that you're on this continuous step for improvement of customer relationships.
Yes, David, thank you for the question. So at the time of integration of Airgas, I was in charge of the marketing for Air Liquide, and what we have learned from Airgas at that time was omni-channel. So I have to recognize that we have had to really, probably more than the transformation, it was more of a revolution for us to understand how powerful omni-channel is. So I give you another example of my visit to Airgas and the fact that it was really a mind-blowing experience. They took me to one of their local stores. Under your control, Jay, I think you still have 1,000 of them across the US. Okay, so my initial understanding of the acquisition of Airgas was to acquire a company who was able to manage customers through digital resources. And my first visit was to a local store. The typical brick and mortar you might expect in the US, serving very local ecosystems. So I was very confused about that. And my first question to the management at that time was really, when do you plan to close your stores? Because I don't get it. If you're a digital company, why do you keep such a large cost having to manage a 1,000 store across the US with the cost of the rentals and the like? And the question from the management at that time, the answer from the management of Airgas at that time is there is no way we are going to close our stores. Okay, and this is where we started having the discussion about omni-channel and why it is important to have the local stores, the telesales, the sales reps visiting customers, the internet website, and the ability to have a digital remote connection. And I was also mistaken before my first visit by the fact that I was really thinking that internet was meant to address small customers. And then I discovered that we have a lot of very large Airgas customers who are benefiting from our ability to have this digital way of working with them, and where we are able to connect to the IT system of the customer. And I think it's something we have implemented with very, very large corporations in the US. So I think, so my initial view about Airgas being able to manage small customer through internet was, I think, proven very wrong. And so the omni-channel part was super important for the Air Liquide marketing globally. And the fact that we would manage very large customer through digital was also something we learned. And so you see immediately when you move from a very basic, typical industrial marketing to a omni-channel marketing, where you are not anymore B to large B, but B to large, medium, and small b, is a revolution of the way you look at the experience of your customers. And also is a drastic change in the way you organize your marketing. Is a very important way in the way you want to spend your money in marketing. And so basically you have to change 80% of the people you have in your marketing because there is a total disconnect between what you want to do and what your people have been doing and are capable of doing based on their own experience. So it was definitely a revolution for marketing globally.
For people. Interesting to know. Thank you so much, Philippe and Jay, for these insights. We're now entering the last quarter of this conversation. So again, we have a couple of questions that appear here, but feel free to continue asking more questions as well. Actually, I want to follow up, with maybe one or two questions that are popping in the chat here. You mentioned, and thanks for mentioning these anecdotes, because they're the ones that I think help us really realize what happens on the ground. You mentioned how surprised you were when quite some time ago you visited the store and that. And one of the questions here is, to what extent the cultures have remained parallel versus integrated. So another way to think about this is, imagine the young Philippe, of 20 years today, who would actually do the same visit. Would he be as surprised? And if not, another question is asking, like, why would he be less surprised? Is it because there's more information about like different types of KPIs, different types of use cases that different geographies are using, or that are relevant for different segments? What has really changed in terms of kind of the culture to bring these two approaches together?
Want me to start, Jay? Then you can complement. So young Philippe was very surprised 30 years ago during the first visit to Berkeley in California. And I was surprised to discover that people were able to develop skills in a very different way from what I was exposed to in my university in France. And so I think that the customer centricity is we need to accept that we have to learn from one country to the other, one culture to the other, because I think that I learned honestly a lot from my day in Japan, because then you understand what is the real meaning of customer centricity, and when you are really committed to the level of service. So I learned a lot in the US. I learned a lot from Japan, but I learned a lot from China and Africa and the like. So I think that what is very important being an international company is the ability to learn from so many cultures. And I think that the way you manage your customers is really reflecting the culture in the country. And if you can make the best of all these cultures, then I think you can build a very strong international company from a customer centricity standpoint.
So global mindset,
a lot to be learned.
Global mindset, but local operations and way to build relationships, right? 100%. Absolutely. Jay, anything to add on this? I don't know whether you visit Air Liquide, but young Jay, what has changed from in terms of bringing the two cultures together? What kind of initiatives did you undertake to shift a little bit the cultures in the recent years?
Well, young Jay hasn't been seen in quite a while, but we did really, in the initial stage of the integration, we tried to keep our focus on bringing the two operations together, getting the systems integrations completed. So culturally, I think we were perhaps a little bit less integrated at that time, and that has taken place more so in recent years. And as Philippe mentioned, you bring the best of two groups of people or multiple groups of people, and the intent is to then everybody's sharper, everybody's more effective. And I'd say on the Airgas side, some of the cultural elements that have been really additive and accelerating for us There's certainly process perspective that comes from the engineering side of the business, which wasn't our forte. And that can really play out not just in highly engineered applications, but for example, even in the way that we approach safety process and safety policy. And we've been on a trajectory of consistently improving safety record over the years that I'm very proud of, and that I think we're all very proud of. And I do believe, you know, there's certainly a culture element to it, but I believe that some of the process expertise and discipline that we've learned from being part of the Air Liquide organization has helped propel us that direction. Similarly, with technology and the way that Air Liquide listens to technological developments, works to incorporate them. Those are some pretty big disciplines for us today as we look to incorporate artificial intelligence, you know, data lakes, product information management, content management systems. You know, the expertise of a large global organization can really help bring a lot of resource to bear, as well as best practices, while we look to scale those things up.
Well, thank you very much, Jay. No, absolutely. This is fantastic. Maybe let's, Jean-Michel, did you want to take the lead on some of the questions, as we have only 8 minutes?
Yeah, there's many questions. We'll try to filter a little bit. There's a question maybe that you know, Philippe or Jay, you could take. Do you have an example of when a client feedback led to uncovering a big issue? Maybe we can broaden that to when a client feedback brought maybe a big opportunity being discovered.
One example, very quick one, Jay, if I may. We visited a very large customer in the US, which is a global customer of Air Liquide. And they told us, do you have an R&D center in the US in order to join forces and develop new technologies? And at that time, our presence in the US from an R&D standpoint was minimum. And so we understood, speaking to the customer, that not having this ability to accompany the customer from an innovation standpoint was absolutely detrimental to the long-term relationship. And so we took the advantage of having Airgas joining Air Liquide, and so having a much larger footprint in the US to build a brand new R&D center. And now we are developing, by the way, new technologies, and some of them, of course, to serve Airgas customers. I think that's a good example of you listen to your customer, they know they are right, you know they are right, you know they are making a point, and then you decide to act and to spend the money you have to spend.
Thank you, Philippe. Jay, any example you would like to share?
Yeah, I'll offer one up from you know, the very opposite end of the scale on our customers that use cylinder gases have to keep track of our cylinders that are in their possession. And our system provides records to them of the cylinders that we ship to them and that they return to us, and the number of cylinders that remain in their possession. Our industry has not been excellent over the years about managing those balances, and customers were telling us, you know, this is a pain point for us. There are some positives, some negative balances on the statements. We're struggling to read them. We actually made that element one of the things that I mentioned earlier in our customer effort tracking. We put a highlight on it, and we've worked that element down substantially in the last 2 years, such that it really doesn't rise to being anywhere near the level of customer frustration and pain that it used to be. And that's just from listening to the customer.
Thank you, Jay. That's a great example as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, maybe just approaching like last 5 minutes. So a few, like I think we're getting into what what can we do on a daily basis? So there's a question which I really like, which is here, what do you do as executives to keep driving customer-centric culture? Okay, we all know that it's important. And we know, what does it involve? There's another question on measurement. Does it mean that you have perhaps more granular measurement by channel, by segment? Is it also a question of mindset? And have there really concrete examples, I think, of practices that you have been fostering in the last years or so that really help you to have that in the on top of the agenda? Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I know we all have more data than we can consume. We all have more KPIs and reports than even some of our computers can manage. So it very much becomes a responsibility of leadership to help the teams focus, and the ability to remove obstacles and empower your teams with the right tools. And then that's where you place your energy and your focus in discussions with the teams and in reviewing with the teams. I think it's very easy to become internally focused, distracted on projects. Even efficiencies can become a distraction if you don't keep them in context of how do our customers benefit from this. And it really, in my mind, becomes about how you interact with your teams every day. That's what makes its way through the organization and ensures alignment, putting the focus on the things that customers care about.
Thank you, Jay. Philippe, any?
Very simple one, which is not rocket science, but this is what we try to do. Is in my team, they all know that if there is a customer priority, they can absolutely destroy my agenda in order to make sure that we create the space to deal with this customer priority. Whatever I'm supposed to do or was supposed to do, they know they have priority to create the opportunity to deal with the customer issue or customer meeting or customer whatever, but they all know, and it's very clear that this is where they have a priority in the agenda.
Customer is king of time, as you mentioned. Absolutely.
Exactly.
I love that.
Exactly.
I love that. Jay.
Hey, David, could I add one thing? I know
Of course.
I mentioned that well-designed incentives are also important in this equation. And that is an ongoing evolution for us as well. I think we've been decent at it in the past, and we're continuing to refine our approach there.
And on that front, any concrete elements, like, so I know, like in other industries, for instance, they look into how NPS of the customers kind of integrated into compensation. Anything else that you can share with us?
So as I mentioned earlier, we do use an NPS as part of our viewpoints. The piece of that's more integrated into compensation is churn. And so, by watching customer purchasing patterns and minimizing the loss of customers, of course, organic sales growth rates benefit from that. We do have a churn component in our incentive plans for leaders and for salespeople. And there are a number of other KPIs that one way or another make themselves into incentives.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think we're almost time. So it was a very rich discussion. Thank you so much for joining, Jean-Michel. Thank you, Jay, Philippe. A pleasure to have you with us. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. We will be in touch. But we wish everyone a rest of the day. We hope this conversation was useful, and when we hope to see you at another future webinar or opportunity. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.